How is your English?
Not that good. is okay.
is okay? אוקיי. אז לפני שנעבור לאנגלית, כי יש לנו פרק מיוחד היום עם אורח ששפת האם שלו היא אנגלית ומרגיש יותר בנוח לדבר באנגלית, נספר לכם על נותנת החסות שלנו, קרן ההון סיכון גרופ 11 של דובי פרנסיס, לשעבר SGVC, קרן אמריקנית שמחפשת את היזמות והיזמים המבטיחים ביותר בעולם הפינטק. אז אם אתם יזמת או יזם עם רעיון מגניב, פורץ דרך טכנולוגיה מלהיבה ומשבשת לשוק השירותים הפיננסיים, שוק של טריליוני דולרים, ומחפשים להיכנס כמובן לשוק האמריקני בגרופ 11, לשעבר SGVC, מאוד מאוד ישמחו לדבר איתכם. למעשה הם מחפשים את פורצי הדרך של העידן הפיננסי החדש, והנה אנחנו מתחילים בפרק של היום. Hello, Mike Granov.
Hello, thank you for having me. I apologize for the fact that I made Aliyah in my 40s and therefore my Ivrit is not what it should be.
But sorry for telling you, but when was your 40s? Like, wasn't yesterday, right?
It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you do understand him, right?
Somewhat, yes.
Somewhat, like only Shalom or...
Well, he lives in a town that everybody speaks English, so, you know, and
work in an industry where everybody speaks English,
right.
so it's not easy to... Right.
So, Mike Granov, you're the managing partner of Maniv Mobility, which is an auto tech venture fund, right?
That's correct.
The only one in Israel, right? That is only focused on automotive.
Well, there are a number of organizations that focus on mobility. I think we're the largest dedicated venture fund in Israel that's focused just on that.
How many companies have you backed through Maniv so far?
28.
28. And only in mobility, right?
Yes, only in mobility. Some call it automotive, and really that's the starting point because for the last century, mobility has been dominated by a singular mode, which is the individually owned and operated internal combustion engine passenger car. And that's kind of the starting point. But what we see is that mobility today, thanks to digitization, is becoming much more diversified. And so we invest in things that are in and around the car and the auto industry, but also things that are beyond it and anything that helps people and goods move around in a way that's less expensive, more convenient, and cleaner.
Why mobility? I mean, there are so many, and why to focus on one industry?
Well, I think the better question is why venture? For me, mobility has been really at the center of what I've been involved in for more than 15 years. And if I wasn't doing this, I probably would not be certainly wouldn't be running a venture fund doing something else. I would be doing something else in the mobility world. I got my start in this in a very unlikely way, which is I lived in the New York area for most of my life, including at the time of 9/11. And in the years that followed that, I became very interested and frankly outraged by the situation that we found ourselves in, which is that oil was responsible for 97% of global transportation, and at that time, the U.S. imported 70% of its oil.
You learned that by working with Clinton, right? I remember something with Clinton.
I did work with Bill Clinton earlier. But this was really unrelated to that. This was just came out of a yearning to try to find meaning in the post 9/11 world.
For political reasons also?
Yeah, this started just as a political project, and with a buddy, we started an organization called Securing America's Future Energy, based in Washington, D.C., that focused on pushing the U.S. government towards policies that would reduce its dependence on oil. Interestingly enough, within the first 6 months starting the organization, we put on a show that was called Oil Shockwave, and we brought in 10 members that were former cabinet officials in either the two Bush administrations and the Clinton administration. And we basically had a mock cabinet meeting, and we gave them scenarios to see how they would react. One of the scenarios we gave them was an attack on Saudi Arabia's largest oil facilities that took out half of production.
Well,
and that was in 2005.
Yeah, and we're now...
It took 14 years for that to actually literally happen. But it shocks me that it took that long, and we're very lucky in a sense, because had it happened 10 years ago, we would see oil now at $150, $200 a barrel. It's only because of the advances made in extraction technology, particularly in the U.S., that we have the ability to withstand this kind of a shock. But nonetheless, people still underestimate the degree to which OPEC continues to set the global price of oil, and that it is both good for security and for the global economy to diversify our transportation sector away from strictly oil-based. And I think if you look at our companies, many of them are doing that in different ways.
When in your career did you bump into a person called Elon Musk?
Well, I can actually just pick up right where I left off, which is that in working on this organization in Washington, D.C., we crafted the 2006 energy bill that passed the U.S. Congress, signed by President Bush, that increased fuel economy standards and put in place the first in the world incentives for electric cars. And when I took a look at this from the prism of an investor or a business person rather than just political, I said, what could actually work? What would I invest in? And really electrification, I determined, was the only scalable solution for ending the monopoly of oil and transportation. And I really became obsessed with the idea. Spent almost a year searching the globe.
When was it?
This is 2007 now.
Yeah.
Searching the globe for a solution to bring electric cars, which I thought is the way we're going to get away from oil. And in a period of 2 weeks, I met two guys who were both about my age, came to the same conclusion as I did about electric, and had very bold plans. So one of them was an Israeli that many people are familiar with, Agassi, and the second was South African, who was Elon Musk. And after hearing both these plans, people today, they say, oh, you must kick yourself because of the outcomes of each of these individual companies. But the reality is that I would have made the same decision 100 times out of 100.
So you decided
No
to
way.
invest in
Agassi
Yes.
and not in Elon Musk.
That's correct.
Why? What made you do that? Make this?
Well, aside from the fact that, in all honesty, Shai cut a much more impressive figure, at least at that time, I actually thought that he had a much better plan if the goal, and Musk said this was his goal too, was to bring the world to electric cars. Musk, as everyone knows, wanted to do it by building a car brand, by building a company that proved, and he's done this very well, proved that electric cars could be sexy, could be fun, could be sporty and fast and all of that. But then to get from there to actually moving the needle on oil in the economy is a very, very long reach. Whereas Agassi's plan, which I think is the most brilliant business model I ever came across to this day, unfortunately executed not well, but the model was not ahead of its time, as many people today say, but it was exactly at the right time. Today, you actually would go for a different model that wasn't based so much on individual car ownership, but the model really would have brought to the consumer a product that was both less expensive and more convenient. Never mind that it was not importing oil, not polluting the environment, and all of the other advantages. Would have been a better product. And it would have then pushed the entire auto industry that was already existing, that knows how to manufacture cars at scale, which Tesla, of course, is having their problems with. It would have pushed the whole industry to move much quicker in the direction of electrification. You talk today to any of the global automakers, and they'll tell you they're on a path to electrification. Most interestingly to me is GM, which is very adamant about that being their plan. Well, we actually went to President Obama's Auto Task Force in the winter of 2009, right after he took office and was deciding what to do about GM. And we said, everyone knows you're going to bail out GM. Don't do it unconditionally. Make a condition of it a path to electrification. We think an aggressive path, maybe you do less of an aggressive path, but here's the infrastructure plan that goes with it, and the cost of it is about a week's worth of gasoline spend in the United States.
So let's get back. You decided to back Agassi and
Right.
Betterbread, and you became the chairman of the board, right?
No, I was on the board for...
You were on the board.
Yeah, I was an observer and then a board member. Idan Ofer was the chairman.
And
Yeah, sorry.
you invested out of whose money?
Well, I invested some of my own money. I
Right.
actually had a lot of people who wanted to get into that deal, and I put together a special purpose vehicle for that. But more than invest, I really invested myself in this project to a very, very large degree. As I said, going to Washington and working on that angle of it, helping raise a lot of the money. And also, I was called at the time head of oil independence policies for Better Place. So that was really my passion and continues to be in a sense.
So what went wrong? Execution?
Yeah, hubris in a word. We really came to believe, first of all, a lot of things that we expected to happen did happen, and it happened much faster than we thought. For example, the oil spike that came literally 6 months after we incorporated the company. Oil goes from 50 to 150. And car bankruptcies. We thought that the business model of making cars was flawed and that they were really at the mercy of the oil companies, and that in a spike that they'd go bankrupt. And again, that happened in the first year of Better Place. The GM and Chrysler and other global automakers ran into that kind of financial difficulty. Governments, we thought governments come along, spend a lot of money for climate and for oil dependence reasons, and within a year of starting, there's a new president of the United States with enormous popularity, prepared to spend $1 trillion, loving clean energy and infrastructure. So all the stars seem to line up so well. And finally, as is depicted in the introduction of the book Startup Nation, Shimon Peres and Shai meet with Carlos Ghosn, at the time the CEO of Renault, and he commits within 15 minutes of a meeting to 100,000 battery switchable cars. So all this happens, and the momentum was so much that, I think we got too big for our britches, and we really thought we're the destined ones to solve this problem, and acted very much too much that way, and ultimately alienated automakers, the media, the public, and every constituency. You can't win the market when you do that.
Yeah.
Hybris of Shai?
I would say that the entire company took on that aura, but obviously the tone comes from the top. So I think we all bear blame for it. There's a terrific book that actually I think chronicles it in much more detail than I can, by someone who actually owned one of the cars, also a columnist for the Jerusalem Post named Brian Blum. The book is called Totaled, and I think for people who are interested in that story, it's a pretty good read.
You got the Viv sold.
Are you connected to Shai today? You're not.
He's not in his Christmas list right now. After Better Place. But you after that crash and burn, you still a believer in.
Contrary to all of my instincts, I was pretty sure of two things. One, I was never going to raise outside money from people again, and two, I was going to never have anything to do with cars again.
So what happened?
What happened is my wife said, "You know what? We've always said let's go spend a year in Israel with the kids. This is the moment to do it." And I said, "Were you crazy? We got to go be neighbors with all the people who I sold cars to that they just lost their network." But we did, and after a year, the kids forced us to spend a second year, and after that, we literally flipped a shekel that landed on its side, and we decided that was a sign we were supposed to stay. But in that period of time, I was trying to figure out what to focus on next, and something very interesting happened, and this is like late 2013, early 2014, which is the time when the global mobility industry was beginning to emerge, and particularly here in Israel. It was a time after Waze had been sold and when Mobileye was just about to go public and then, of course, later be acquired. But also there was just this whole plethora of startups that was starting to come up, and a pattern started to emerge where I would get calls from successful Israeli entrepreneurs who had sold their previous company, maybe in telecom, maybe in cyber, and they were looking at a new idea that touched on mobility. They heard that I was around. I had some experience talking to car companies and so forth from Better Place. I'd have coffee with them. I'd do my best to give them some guidance, a connection or two, and then I'd say at the end of the meeting, "This is really interesting. Do you mind if I put in a small angel investment myself?" And that is the way that the portfolio began to come together. I was very blessed 5 years ago next week to meet my partner, Olaf Sackers, who brought an incredible energy and intellect and passion to the process. So therefore, we started to attract more and more opportunities. We also started to attract attention of people who wanted, for whatever reason, to be exposed to this ecosystem, whether they were in the auto industry or in the hedge fund industry, and trying to decide how to invest based on what's going to happen. And as a result, we started to take outside money. We started to scale the operation, and now we're investing out of our second fund.
How big is the fund?
So the first fund was $44 million invested in 24 companies, 19 of which are in Israel. And the second fund, which we announced the close of over the summer, is a $100 million fund We've already done 5 deals, though we started investing beginning of this year. Interestingly, the second fund is largely backed by strategics. So we have, ironically, maybe, Renault, and, as well as Nissan Mitsubishi.
Well, Carlos is not there anymore, so...
But he was there, actually approved the investment.
Oh,
he was still there at that time. But all the people there are actually terrific. We have a couple other car companies, Hyundai and BMW, and we have a whole bunch of Tier 1 suppliers, including LG, and Aptiv and Lear in the U.S. and the first strategic...
Which are Tier 1 companies.
And the first strategic that we had is out of France, Valeo. And then we also have an oil company, Shell, an Israeli car importer, and a few other strategics, as well as financial investors. So, it's a tremendously symbiotic relationship. We're able to get a lot of guidance from them on individual companies, on trends and technology, and they're able to get a lot from us on the situation in Israel, as well as the global mobility technologies here.
Mike, 2-3 years ago, mobility and auto tech were the hottest industry in Israel and around the world. Are we waking up from a dream right now?
No, what's happening is that we're now understanding that that's not a dream, but one aspect of it is a little bit closer to a dream. 3 years ago, if you talked about the future of mobility, it was synonymous with people to robotic taxis, to what we call level 4 self-driving cars that would be shared and basically Uber without the driver. That's what the vision was 3 years ago. And that vision may yet come to pass, but it's not coming to pass in the next 5 years. So luckily, I think because of the lesson of Better Place, I was very adamant about the fact that when we invested, there had to be a path to success in a world in which level 4 got postponed by a long time, because there was a tremendous amount of hype, as you will recall, around this notion. I remember a certain investment bank that wrote a thesis that called it like the utopian society, that it said it was only a few years off once we all had access to basically free mobility anywhere, anytime. And so as we invested, we didn't invest on the thesis that level 4 was not going to come as fast as everybody said, but we invested in companies that were somewhat agnostic to that. Take, for example, a company that's doing data from the car, whether that car is level 4 self-driving shared taxi, or whether it's a traditional owned internal combustion engine driven vehicle. It's still producing a lot of valuable data. And so we focused really in Fund 1 a lot on data and communications companies, as well as, I would say, enabling autonomy companies, which are also enabling safety systems and ADAS systems. And so, yes, we've had a couple casualties of level 4 being postponed, but only a couple out of a large portfolio. So I'm pretty pleased with that.
What happened to Oryx Vision?
Oryx, it's really, I think, a terrific story for understanding the maturity of an entrepreneur in Ronnie Wellenstein, the founder of Oryx. When we invested in Oryx, and I might add that didn't get as much of it as we had hoped at the time.
Just a second, what is Oryx?
Oryx is a LiDAR company, right?
Yes. So
and a few weeks ago, right, they decided to shut down the business, even though they had like $40 million still in the bank.
And give
Am
back
I
money
correct?
to investors.
That is roughly correct. And just for background, LiDAR is a vision system. It's an advanced vision system that if you asked anyone 3 years ago, they would have said absolutely compulsory for level 4 self-driving car. By the way, the one major detractor of that idea is Elon Musk. Now, he's got some self-interested reasons to believe that you can do level 4 autonomy without LiDAR, because you're not going to be able to put a LiDAR on Teslas, at least not on existing Teslas.
Why? Because it's too big of a sensor?
It's too expensive.
It's way too expensive and not really meant for retrofit. And even going forward, it would not do wonders for the price of Teslas, at least in the near term. But, he makes a compelling argument nonetheless that you don't need it. So the point is, 3 years ago, these things were all true. There were very few LiDAR companies, only 2 that I had heard of prior to meeting Oryx. Everyone thought, as we said, that self-driving taxis were 3-4 years away, and everyone thought they all needed LiDAR. Well, now, fast forward, and we know that self-driving cars at that level are further away. As I said, we're not convinced that they all definitely need LiDAR. And most interestingly, about 100 LiDAR companies got significantly funded. There was a gold rush into LiDAR technology, the likes of which I'd never seen. And Ronnie just sort of looked around and said, yeah, we're on a path to getting a viable product, but when we do, it's going to cost a lot more to get there, and we're going to take more investor money on the chance that out of these 100, we're going to be the one that wins the market, assuming that there is a market to win, which is not for sure, and assuming that LiDAR is a necessary component. Put that all together, and I think Ronnie said he didn't think it was worth the investors' money, didn't think it was worth his time and talent, and I think made a very mature decision to find another home for that technology and move on.
And what does it say about the other LiDAR companies also in Israel?
Innoviz
raised tons of money.
They did raise tons of money, and they have a reason to believe they have a differentiated product, and I wish them all the best. I think it would be fantastic.
What do you think? I know what they think.
Honestly, I'm not close enough to the technology or to their strategy to understand, but I think that automotive mobility technology is a wide playing field, and whether it's their original plan that they're going to be successful in, or whether they're going to find another way, I don't know. I wish them nothing but the best.
What's your thought? When will we have like connected, autonomous, shared, and electric robotaxis like dominating our roads?
I think the right answer to that is that not before a lot of other really interesting things happen in the world of mobility. And I don't know if the answer to that question is, it's no less than 5 years, I'll guarantee you that. It may not be less than 10 years. But what we're focused on right now is the fact that there are certain trends that we're seeing globally, and the biggest of those trends, I think, is urbanization. What's interesting about that is it doesn't matter if it's China or Europe or the U.S. or even Israel. Have you met anybody in their 20s or 30s that wants to live anywhere other than Tel Aviv, right? Everybody wants to live in cities. They want to live densely. And this is totally incompatible with the mobility model that we've had for the last 100 years. And it means lots of different things. Doesn't mean one thing. But one thing that obviously has shown up on the scene in the last 2 years with an incredible ferocity is micromobility. Is the bikes and the scooters that are all around and shared.
And that's one of your last investments, right?
Not precisely, but it's, yes, one of our most recent investments is in micromobility. Interestingly enough, a New York-based company.
What did they do?
They use the micromobility business model, which means that you're a member of the platform, and then you can pick up any vehicle anywhere you see it and take it to anywhere within the service area. But they use it not for bikes or scooters, but for mopeds. And of course, the terminology here gets confusing because sometimes people call mopeds scooters, and in Europe they call them Vespas, and here they call them tus-tus. Right? But in the U.S. they call them mopeds, and there's not a lot of them in the U.S. because it just never caught on as a thing. But it ends up being a really compelling micromobility vehicle. And I think one of the reasons is that it's a lot more substantial than a bike or a scooter. It's, much more expensive, but more importantly, it has a license plate. And what does that mean? It means that there's an accountability. There's no doubt about where that vehicle is supposed to be. It's not going to be on the sidewalk. It's not even going to be in a bike lane. It's going to be on the road with the cars.
And you need a license to drive it.
And you need a driver's license.
Yeah.
Very important.
In Israel, you need a specific motorbike.
Until we change that regulation.
I hope you do that, even though I have
We did succeed in changing that regulation in Texas already.
Oh.
He has a lot of connection in the government. Didn't you get it yet?
You only need a driver's license. By the way, it's not like for a scooter app where you just take a picture of any driver's license, including one from a movie, and they'll approve you. But they actually do run a check, and if you have any record on your driver's license, you won't be accepted in the program. You have to be 21. There are other regulations that apply, but most people get accepted pretty quickly, and then they can use these mopeds. And if you're thinking about, we're right now in Brooklyn and Queens and New York and in Washington, D.C., and both those places have mass transit, but it's not great. And particularly in New York, it's not great within the boroughs. And Brooklyn is a huge borough, and there are all these neighborhoods, and most people don't have an easy way to go a 2-3 mile trip. What are we replacing? By and large, we're replacing ride-hail, or replacing Uber or taxi cabs. So instead of a ride in a big internal combustion vehicle with emissions and all that, you're getting on an electric scooter. It's taking you just at least no more than no more time than it would take in Uber. It's about a quarter of the price, and it really has caught on like wildfire in.
So right now I can use it in Brooklyn because I just came back from Brooklyn.
Absolutely.
And too bad I didn't know about it.
What's the name of the company?
Next time, it's called Revel Transit. You can
Revel
find it
Transit.
at gorevel.com.
And people might ask you, I mean, that's one of the things investors ask entrepreneurs, what's the barrier to entry? Or
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I'll tell you, Revel's been a fascinating case study for us because it's really unlike any other company we've ever invested in, and it does not have barriers to entry for the most part. It's about speed, and it's about getting out into the market and establishing a brand and establishing availability fast, and that's what Revel is doing.
Do you have any other B2C?
And before that, it needs lots of cash to scale.
It does, but it also is able to obtain debt financing, which makes it easier to scale, and it generates a lot of cash as well. We're not used to this in our world, and so that also obviously is able to track more cash.
And do you have any other B2C company, or this is the only one in your portfolio?
It is definitely the headline one. We have a small ownership in a company called Owl. That's a U.S.-based in-car dash cam that sells to consumers as well as to businesses. But for the most part, we do mostly B2B.
Do you believe Israeli companies can be successful B2C companies?
I do believe so. And in fact, one of the things I've given a lot of thought to recently is that not by design, but just by what we have found recently in investing out of our second fund is the most interesting opportunities are in the realm of digitally enabled mobility service model, business model innovation type companies, not Israel's sweet spot. And as a result, a bunch of our early investments in Fund 2 are outside of Israel. But I've been talking to a lot of people recently about, could businesses like this come out of Israel? I think the answer is yes. I think it just sort of takes not necessarily the marketing side and all that, which Israeli companies tend to rely on others to do anyway. But some of the one example of this actually already exists in the market is Via. Right, Via is exactly that kind of company. It's been around already a long time, and it's run right out of Azrieli across the street from us here, and it's one of many mobility products on the streets of Manhattan that comes out of Tel Aviv. Interestingly enough.
So what's next? What's your newest passion in mobility?
I think it's really what I just described in terms of the sector of digitally enabled platforms for mobility. And like I said, we may enter a world in which we have this utopian robotic taxi environment sometime in the future. But I think long before we get there, there's going to be a plethora of opportunities that we'd never even thought of, like no one thought of kick scooters until 2 years ago, and no one thought of this micro-mobility model. I think one of the most fascinating things to watch over the next, really, I'd say 6, 12, 18 months is how cities begin to grapple with these changes, which are happening much quicker than policy usually gets made. And I think Tel Aviv has already changed the scooter regulations 3 times in the last year. And there's about 200 cities around the world grappling with this at the same time. Out of that, you're going to have some outliers. You're going to have some bold thinkers. You're going to have some cities that decide to take major thoroughfares and make them only for, say, micro-mobility products, which means like a vehicle that doesn't have any emissions, it's electric or human-driven and under 500 pounds. And, in fact, I think if Mike Bloomberg were still the mayor of New York City, he'd pick an uptown avenue and a downtown avenue and say, that's just for micro-mobility, and use all the scooters, all the bikes, electric mopeds, pedestrian lanes, skateboards that you want. And you know what? I think it would be fantastic, not just for the environment, for congestion, but for commerce.
And if there's a young Israeli entrepreneur that is passionate about mobility, which area would you give him an advice to focus? Just generically speaking, I think this mobility service model idea and everything that's going to come in around it, it's going to be whole businesses that develop around this ecosystem of micro-mobility, of digitally enabled mobility services. But obviously, if that person's passionate about cybersecurity, there's lots of opportunities in automotive and mobility cybersecurity. Still?
We have two companies in our portfolio that do automotive mobility cybersecurity. there's lots of aspects to this. So depending on people's interests and passions and skills and talents, there's a lot of ways to approach mobility.
Aviv, I know you can speak about mobility for another hour or so, but we gotta go.
I'm sure Mike is also, yeah. Good. Mike Granov from Maniv Mobility, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me and bearing with my Anglit.
Yeah? הצלחנו, לא? היינו בסדר.
מייק בעיקר דיבר, אנחנו עשינו כן עם הראש.
אנחנו עשינו כן עם הראש. שאלנו פה ושם, אני יודע. ועד כאן 30 דקות או פחות, or 30 minutes or less. לא נסיים בלי להגיד תודה. לנותנת החסות שלנו קרן ההון סיכון, גרופ 11 לשעבר SGVC, קרן להשקעה בתחומי הפינטק, שבין החברות המצליחות שלה טיפלתי, טריפ אקשנס, נקסט אינשורנס ועוד. אם אתם מחפשים קרן אמריקנית עם פינה חמה בלב ליזמים ישראלים, בגרופ 11 לשעבר SGVC של דובי פרנסיס, מאוד ישמחו לדבר איתכם.
הפרק הזה זמין בכלכליסט, בספוטיפיי, בכל מקום שאתם מאזינים לפודקאסטים, הוא זמין שם. אם אתם כבר מאזינים לזה, אז עשינו לעוד פרק בתחום המוביליטי. אביב, איזה פרק אהבת שעשינו בתחום המוביליטי?
אורן בצללי, מנכ"ל הרמן ישראל.
נכון, מגניב. זהו.
עשינו הרבה פרקים על מוביליטי.
פעם בשבוע בערך, אנחנו עושים את זה אחד נראה לי.
כן.
אז יאללה, ביי.
ביי ביי.